Welcome back, friends. Episode number 104 of the podcast Behind the Badge here at the Monroe County Sheriff's Office in Rochester, New York. The whole objective of this is to share who supports us and what the people that wear the badge look like behind the badge, who they are and what they do for a living, but also as they are as people and men and women of character and work ethic and all this good stuff we're trying to share, really trying to illustrate that. But first, give credit to Tommy Burnett for that bumper music there. He's so kind, a guy from Fairport, New York, just giving his talents, letting us use his bumper music. That's pretty cool. Today we got senior technician. I just asked you off there, is that a title or something like that? But apparently you're the senior technician of the MCSO, Dan Luffman. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great, Sheriff. How are you?
Great to have you with us. Since I became sheriff 5.5 years ago, we spent way too much time together because you're always in the mix of it. You're always at the scene of something catastrophic or something that is really needing an expertise. As a cop, as a road cop, and now with your specialty that you've taken in the full-time world is an evidence technician. So we wanted to talk about that evidence part of it today, but more share who you are and what you do, outside the badge first. So how about just a quick introduction of yourself for the audience, who you are and what do you do? What makes you tick when you ain't got the blue uniform on?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dan Luffman. I've been here with the Sheriff's Office for 29 years. Since 94, I've been a technician since 1997.
Oh, you see the advent of this whole forensic science thing then.
That's right.
In particular with TV and specials and TV shows. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's real big now, in the public on TV and stuff like that. So, science has been around a long time. We've been doing this stuff for a long time, and it's enjoyable.
And off duty?
It depends on the season. Summertime, I like to spend time outdoors, hiking, outdoor activities. Wintertime, I still play hockey. Feel a little old for that, but I'm still into that pretty actively.
Still throw a hip check?
I'm a goalie.
Goalie?
Checks, yeah.
You can throw a hip check from the goalie.
I have,
just got to leave the.
It happens.
Got to leave the crease a little. That's all. It happens sometimes.
It does.
I tripped. Sorry. Hiking. Where do you like to go? I mean, you a 46er or done any Adirondacks or?
I have not.
Lakes
I haven't been up there in a long time.
Yeah.
Just local stuff. Men and Ponds is pretty good.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Stuff like that. We have a lot of good opportunities for that here in Rochester.
Yeah, some good elevation out there too at Mendon. It's amazing that if you start going towards the water tower.
Oh yeah.
You can get a little climb in. Love the run out there. It's a great place. Yeah, so evidence technician, we see it on TV, the forensic sciences. Every young person that wants to become a cop now, that's the first thing they want to do. They study it in school. There's programs, specifically criminal justice programs for this forensic science. We'll get deeper into the science part of it, but what drew, we all have specialties in law enforcement we like to gravitate towards: vehicle and traffic enforcement, evidence technician work, SWAT work, drug work. And that's the beauty of something like the sheriff's office. There's so many opportunities. What drew you to evidence work?
So the story goes, I was pretty new. I had a couple years on.
Right.
And I worked CSO in afternoons, which is the west side of the county. And I worked the Hamlin car a lot.
Right.
And as it happened, we had, unfortunately, a guy passed away up there. So we had a death at a home. And we had a technician come out per, protocol and take some photographs. So I didn't know much about any of it, but what I did know is that whoever that technician was, when we needed him in Hamlin, we waited a long time for him to get there.
Good point.
And so a posting came out, an opening for a new technician on the road, and I decided I would be that guy so I could get a camera. And so when me and my buddies needed a technician, we could, get the photos done right away and then, get back to playing cops and robbers.
Right.
What I didn't realize is that there was a lot more involved to it, and I wouldn't be staying in Hamlin. I'd be going, all over the
Across
county.
the county, right?
Yeah. So, I had to learn it pretty quick, but that's how I got into it.
That's interesting. Just trying to fill a need you had out there.
Yep.
In the sheriff's office, so we have, for lack of a better term, technicians on the road. They do that as an additional duty. Train at the same level, but do it as an additional. And then we have full-time technicians that do this full-time, that process the more intense scenes, I guess, or the more involved scenes, but also they're available all the time for the evidence transfers, the evidence, all the things we got to do with evidence. Collecting it's one thing, processing it and tracking it and delivering it to courts and all that other stuff is a whole other beast in itself that we'll talk about. So, how many people full time at the sheriff's office?
We have 6 full-timers, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but somewhere in the vicinity of 20. We don't call them part-timers, we call them field technicians.
Field techs, okay.
Yeah, so in totality, about 26, 27 technicians.
Yeah, in the field tech, I think I spent 19 years on a SWAT team, right? So we're trained in a specialty skill, but you're a patrol officer, a patrol deputy. That's your primary job. But as you said, when you're out in C-zone as a field tech, the bell rings. You're going all the way across the county to help process the scene or something like that. And it's a burden. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of extra work, a little extra money. I hope. No. So see, I've learned 2 new things as a sheriff here. Who negotiates your contracts? The undersheriff. Just say the undersheriff.
The undersheriff.
Okay, good.
Yes.
We'll work on that.
Does a great job.
It does a great job. He gets a good pay raise. Well, I just set myself up for the future contract negotiation.
There you go.
Field techs should probably get a little extra cash, I think, because it's an extra. It's one heck of an extra lift. All the responsibility of equipment you got to carry with you, and then the process and the scenes. You still got your preliminary investigation you were just involved in back at C-Zone or wherever you're working. I can only imagine. What's your favorite part? I mean, as an evidence technician, you mentioned photography was one of the first things you're interested in. That's a big lift in the evidence world. But what do you consider your specialty? What do you like to go after? What do you like, that clue you like to find and preserve and possibly use for as a future prosecution?
Well, I think probably the most well-known area would be fingerprints. Everybody knows what fingerprints are. They varying amount they know about it, but everybody knows what a fingerprint is. That's traditional. It's been on all the police shows.
Right.
Since there were police shows.
The dusting. The dusting.
Just
and
like that.
Lifting.
Yeah. So that's rewarding. But I think mainly just the opportunity to be involved in a lot of different calls.
Yeah.
Because I do travel a lot and I don't stay in one area. I get to interact with everybody on the road patrol.
Right.
So and that's a big benefit.
Yeah, it's your personality.
Yeah. Social.
Yeah, Mr. Social. I like it. And then, since you've been a technician, just the advent of DNA, and the collection, but also the processes of it, the speed it's coming back nowadays versus the old days, the ability to use it in prosecutions. Case law has changed a little bit sometimes around these types of new technologies. But that's been a game changer for us. That's a great. We did a podcast with the double initial murders. That was the previous podcast, and we were talking about how a trooper just grabbed some evidence years ago on the side of 104 in Webster.
Yep.
That turned out to be what today we call DNA, but something we can track with that type of technology. Which this is before DNA was even talked about, right?
That's right.
So that's what you guys do. You gather this evidentiary stuff that may or may not have value. You don't know. You preserve it. You catalog it, and then some future, hopefully, prosecution can use it to bring justice to some kind of crime victim. It's pretty cool work.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So photography, that's a big part of it. I see you guys, some of the B-roll here is taking pictures. I'm always looking for that. I think of some of our best technicians are always out there at a different angle, taking, finding stuff. That's one of the first things. You find things that we can't find, that trace evidence and stuff. Then photographing, that's a big part of the job.
Definitely. Yeah.
So what type of specialty training do you get there?
With photographs, the state has it's a week-long school.
Okay.
I think it's called Police Specialty Photography or something like that. And basically in that class, we just go through, we learn different camera systems that are available by department. Each department kind of has different stuff, very similar to each other, but different stuff. And just work through different types of mock crime scenes, identifying different evidence unique to those scenes and different ways to photograph and document it.
Gotcha. And then preservation of that. That's right. Let's talk a little bit about the chain of custody of evidence and what a person in your position does for the sheriff's office when it comes to that maintaining that chain of custody is very important for court proceedings later on. You can lose evidence really quick. Not physically lose it, but lose it in court.
Sure.
If there's not proper documentation and a flow of that, which we call the chain of custody. A little bit about that, just collecting sometimes a mass amount of evidence and being able to categorize it and log it and secure it and deliver it to court.
So, scene security is key. From the time the first officer or deputy gets there, we are now responsible, not technicians, but all police officers involved in that case are responsible for making sure that evidence present at the scene initially is accounted for all the way up to including potentially a trial or court proceedings. So every person that has possession of that evidence has to document it in some way, shape, or form, whether it be on a property sheet, on a crime report, so that chronologically you can go through from the time the first officer gets on scene and account for where that evidence is every step of the way and up until including court.
And that could be hundreds of pieces of evidence at one crime scene.
Absolutely.
That could be months and months in between the preservation of the crime scene by the first responding deputy to a court proceeding, and even later on some kind of additional court proceedings that might come out, whether it's a a secondary trial or a retrial. Maintaining that whole chain is very important, and that's something a defense lawyer will look at almost first. Just to see if they can get any of the evidence
Absolutely,
tossed out
yes.
by failure to document who had that chain of custody of that.
Particularly if it's very good evidence.
Yeah.
They do everything they can to attack it, and
so
rightfully so. That's their job.
That's their job.
The defendants, the accused, they're entitled to that right.
Right.
They have somebody fight for them in their corner. So we have to make sure we have all our ducks in a row. We do things properly.
Yeah, and it's another skill I see of it. It's tenacity. I think when I see evidence technicians, I see it. They're tenacious, right? They're always looking for that. We say the word trace evidence like we just blow over, but we're looking for the most minute. We're looking at things you can't even see, right? And
Sometimes.
collect it as evidence,
Sure.
right? And you can't see it. How do you collect it? And that's where your specialty skills comes in. But more importantly, your personality of just being tenacious. Digging and keep on looking and scouring and getting out technology like simple metal detectors, right, and things like that. But finding evidence inside a car that no one sees by vacuuming up the car and
Sure.
seeing what we get out of that, right? That's just all for justice. I mean, that's what we're here for, to bring justice and bring some kind of accountability to people that commit crimes, but also justice for the victim. And I think of several scenes, absolutely horrific scenes, just since I've been sheriff, but a city police officer and a grease chief for years and years. It's amazing what a human would do to another human. Right. It's literally it's beyond comprehension. That's why we have a hard time sometimes processing what we see. But then you guys have to go into those scenes that are just absolutely mind-boggling, horrific. You'll never unsee what you saw, and then you guys got to go in there and spend hours, processing that scene. Most deputies will go in, yep, it is what it is, do some preliminary work and step out and secure it and let you guys come in and process for hours and hours, stepping over things you don't want to step on, picking things up you don't want to pick up. I mean, it's just got to be a draw on you. It's got to be that extra draw. We're all cops. We see things we don't want to see. But how do you process that? I mean, you got to spend hours in things that people walk outside and immediately throw up and
Sure.
and never want to see it again. And that's tough.
I've been asked that question a lot.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain it, but it's just something that has to be done.
Right.
These jobs, and fortunately, we don't deal with things of that magnitude every day or even weekly sometimes or that often. But collectively over time, it's happened a lot.
Yeah.
But again, there's justice, for the victim, for families, for people involved, and if we don't go in there and do our job and take the time necessary to do that job and do it the right way, then it's all for nothing. So
Right.
it's what we have to do. It's business. It's not personal necessarily. Sometimes it's personal, but just got to do the job and move on.
And that's what professionals do.
That's right.
That's what a professional cop does. That's a professional football player. Let's just use that because the Bills are in town right now
Sure.
with their camp. But if you fumble a ball or you drop a pass, you can't go back to the huddle and cry about it. You only got 30-some seconds to get back in the game, right?
That's right.
And same thing as an evidence technician. You can process it later, but during the game, you got to be in game mode.
That's right.
You got to compartmentalize and isolate, which again is great to be a professional. But when you step out of the blue uniform, when you go home, when you sit down on the couch, you got to have a mechanism to process these things. Every cop, that's what we're trying to get better as just the sheriff's office. How do we process what we're seeing? Because it's not humanistic. Some of the things we see, it's just against our human nature to see these things. So I do appreciate the work you do. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be an investigator in the first place. I just don't have that personality. Again, tenacious people that just stay on the trail for hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes years, until they get their bad guy. And same thing with evidence technicians. You're in there looking for that minute piece of evidence that could bring justice, maybe a couple of years down the road for this victim. That's pretty cool work. What's been the worst? I mean, you go to some of the worst of the worst. You go to the worst of the worst. Let's put it that way, of crimes that occur in Monroe County. You got one that just stands out that, just incredible crime scene that you couldn't believe you were, having to work within this environment.
There is one that stands out. It was a number of years ago. It did involve a homicide. I don't want to get to too many details,
Right.
Because I don't want to obviously identify anybody. But there was an older woman lived out on the west side of the county, and was a drug addict.
Right.
We think he denies it to this day, but he did commit the crime. He broke into her house to steal, and we believe that
Hmm.
she confronted him, and he brutally murdered her.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm going to leave the details at that,
Yep.
just
Yep.
because we don't want, for public knowledge, we don't
Sure.
need that. But on many levels, that was the worst one I've seen. But that case was solved, and it was solved not for the technicians to stand on a soapbox or anything, but it was solved because of the tech work, DNA collection, and fingerprint collection, fingerprint identification, and he was convicted at trial.
That's great.
So,
That's
there was
great that you can bring
justice.
justice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I say great, that's great that you can bring justice. But and that's why I ask those types of questions because behind the badge, people understand what your experience, what your lived experience as a cop is, let alone an evidence technician. But they also got to understand, I'm going to kind of segue here, if you don't mind, off the
Sure.
evidence technician, but there's criminals in the world, right? There's bad people in the world, and there's victims at every one of these stories. And that poor lady deserved none of this, right? She's minding her own business in her own house, trying to finish out a good life. Her family was thinking she's safe and secure, right? The neighborhood was thinking they're all safe and secure, I'm sure. And all of them are victimized. She's brutally victimized, right? But and that's what gets me frustrated. I almost want to change the term, and I know I'm going to get yelled at for this, but criminal justice system. How about a victim justice system? That's kind of where I go sometimes, right? We still have to process, and you said it earlier, if you're charged with a crime, you deserve a good lawyer. You deserve a lawyer fighting for you. That's our Constitution. We believe in it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I know that we can't undermine the victim impact, right? The impact that every one of these crimes that we document, there's someone losing, if not multiple people losing. And just as things have changed over the last few years in the world of criminal justice, what would be the one thing that if you're a road cop, right? You're a beat cop. You've done that for years. You're a very good cop. What would be the one thing, and again, not to throw people under the bus or point someone out, but what do you need as a beat cop right now to help keep the community safer and more secure? What would be the one thing you would do if you were a sheriff and had a bully pulpit? And be careful here. No, I'm only joking. But
I mean,
we could talk about a thousand things. I mean, there's not one solution. There's not one cause of all this criminality, right? And there's not one solution to it. We got that. But I'm just kind of curious. I don't get a chance to chat with beat cops all the time. So what would be that if I could fix one thing today? Would it be this?
So I don't want to go too far down the path of causation, right?
Yep.
We have kids in homes without parents. They're not learning how to be decent human beings,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. We can talk for days and hours and weeks about all that.
Yep.
In one word, currently in 2023, consequences.
Yeah.
Immediate consequences. There are none.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of bail reform.
Yep.
That was terrible. I think we can agree on that. It was fixed to some degree. But judges need to have more say in how they handle their cases, particularly at initial arraignments and certainly in sentencing and all the way through. Raise the age has been terrible.
Difficult, right? I mean,
difficult.
Just difficult to
and when I say consequences, we see all the stories of the stolen cars and the juveniles victimizing innocent people who work for their things, and they're robbed, their property's stolen, they're assaulted, and the worst that happens to many of these juveniles is they're inconvenienced for a little while the police chase them around.
Thank you.
And maybe catch them,
right,
and then they're set right back out. It's terrible. Consequences.
Yeah. Years ago, I learned the red hot stove theory, right? And it became controversial because, again, we love our Constitution. I've heard you say it. I love it, right? You're innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
But if you're repeating the same offense, and we can articulate that, or you're just plain dangerous, and we can articulate that. Why are people committing crimes not dangerous? Why are people committing crimes dangerous? It could be pretty black and white, and it should be at the judgment of a person wearing a black robe to determine that, because we're detaining someone that has been convicted of a crime. Love my Constitution. But we got to also be able to do both. We got to look at young people that just are refusing to comply, and we're chasing them all over God's creation and stolen cars at 3:30 in the morning. An appearance ticket is not doing that kid any good.
No, appearance tickets for a candy bar, a Snickers bar stolen at the gas station. It's not for dangerous people who are putting people at risk.
Right. And great point. I mean, just for we can do our own debater. Yeah, we're not talking about mass incarceration. We're not talking about locking people up that did something stupid. We're not talking about locking people up that go, you know what, I screwed that one up. I won't do it again. Judge, let me out. I'll go home. We're talking about people that say, screw the system.
That's right.
And they're out there, and that's what people refuse to hear. And that's where I go back to every one of these stories has a victim at the end of it, let alone a deputy at the end of it. It's got to chase these kids and worry about the liability that comes with that, worry about the critique that's going to come if one of these kids wrap themselves around a tree or a pole during this pursuit, or another arrest last night in the city by some of our task force members, and another gun coming out of the pocket while the deputies and other task force members aren't, trying to secure this guy's arms. And it's just a recipe for disaster. We're just give us a couple tweaks to these things, work with us, work with us, and we can do both at the same time. But thanks for sharing that perspective. We don't get to hear from people hear from the sheriff all the time, what we can do, but they don't hear from cops, right? And it's just, so I appreciate you sharing that.
It's safe to say, and I know I speak for all of us out on the road when I say these things.
Yeah, absolutely, because you're a cop's cop. I think I've said that a couple times. So every young person I talk to when I'm trying to recruit people to become police officers, one of the first things they say is, I want to be an evidence technician. I want to work forensic sciences. Where did this all come from? I mean, so you were a technician when the TV shows started coming out and the CSIs and all that. It's really helped with recruitment.
It has,
but people don't realize you can't become an evidence technician. You can't become a SWAT officer. You can't become a K-9 officer unless you do 3 or 4 or 5, 10 years as a good beat cop first. You got to do your job first. And but what made it so popular? I mean, you've seen the advent, and you were working in the field.
I got to say, it's the TV shows.
Yeah.
Law and Order, the CSI, and I think there's several different spinoffs or varieties of those shows, and they're very popular. Right. I used to watch Law and Order back then. I didn't watch CSI, but I watched Law and Order a little bit. It's interesting. People like it, and they want to pursue that kind of career. Just unfortunately, around here, in most places, at least in this state, you have to be a sworn police officer first. I know some of the larger cities. They do hire civilian technicians, but that's few and far between.
Yeah, and from a management standpoint, you always look to see, and hope no union presidents listen to this. It's cheaper, I guess, from the standpoint to civilianize some of these positions. Right, deputies are very well trained, very well selected, very well trained, very costly when it comes to that standpoint. I mean, we put a lot of time and energy into deputizing someone. That's just, so to have them do tasks that maybe a civilian could do from a management standpoint and a budgetary standpoint makes sense. But the yin and yang there is obviously those people aren't police officers. They don't think like a cop. They don't have that years and years of experience of taking those crime reports. They have years of experience of working motor vehicle accidents, right? So that's what you're losing when you civilianize some of these positions too. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. Maybe it's a hybrid or a combination thereof. But there's a reason why we haven't moved in that direction here at the sheriff's office because, again, I do budgets every year, and it makes sense. But we also have people that are cops that think like cops that have been trained and make years of experience of cop processing crime scenes. And, again, doesn't make my civilian friends next door any less technicians or more technicians.
Oh, and they're very good next door.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very good.
And there's some study this. They got degrees in these programs. Well, again, another benefit. But that's always a yin and yang that we have. What could or should we civilianize to allow deputies to do deputy work, right? To allow police officers to do police officer work. But I just like evidence technicians having those years and years of experience working with victims, years and years of experience working with, going to that crime scene and working with the crying mom. Her son's been assaulted. And it gives you the empathy and compassion, maybe the tenacity to go do your job and dig deeper and dig harder. That's the way I think of it. So. Any union president was going to call me. Now you won't call me because I don't plan on doing it. So, but it's always a good conversation. We should have those conversations, always pushing forward. So what's in the future? We got a couple minutes left. What do you see in the future of evidence work? I mean, DNA was it, right? There's a lot of new technologies coming out. Facial recognitions are always a controversial talk about thing. As you read the journals and stay in tune with your craft, what's in the future? Do you see anything on the horizon?
Well, I don't know. I'm not into it to any great extent, but the electronics, the cameras, cell phones, computers are advancing, at very fast rates. And we have people that specialize in
they're very good
forensic
too.
Phone analysis, and they're excellent. They do excellent work. That seems to be, the place that's advancing above all others.
Yeah, you talked about fingerprints earlier. I mean, the electronic fingerprint people are leaving, as we're leaving right now. As my cell phone sits on this tower, on this table is, it's scary. People worry about Big Brother watching you. I mean, you're telling the world every day where you are and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Electronically, which helps us a tremendous. And I don't want to get too many of our state secrets, but that's good stuff for us.
That's
based upon probable cause and search warrants, and it's on CSI.
Yeah,
I should probably watch the show, but it's just amazing, and that's the advent of it. Processing a crime scene for a stolen bicycle out of a garage years ago was a couple hour preliminary investigation,
Sure.
in the crime report. Now it could be hours and hours with the Ring cameras, right? And the neighbors, and people expect us to go find that evidence and collect it and process it and get their justice for their stolen bike, right? Which now could turn 4, 5, 6 hours worth of work for a police officer to do their job, right? Just
Absolutely.
because the electronics that are out there helping us, but also it's a lot of extra work.
It is.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So we really appreciate. Hopefully, we have articulated in this show just what evidence work is all about a little deeper. The great people that are doing the work. I really, really appreciate the field technicians. It's great to have the full-time job and be able to concentrate and develop your craft more. But those guys and gals that are doing the extra work.
A lot of extra work.
Yeah, that's a lot of extra work.
It really is.
And I hope they understand that I, as sheriff, appreciate that. And when someone's going, their house is broken into, you got a technician right there, immediately available to start processing that crime scene. And I think we have to emphasize, one of my big pet peeves is a boss, a young boss, is crime scene management. And the evidence that you collect, it's all because of the deputy went there and did their basic job.
That's right.
Crime scene preservation 101. We found evidence, in fire trucks at crime scenes. There's casings on the road. Fire truck pulls up because they're going to do EMS work, save lives. It's 100% appropriate.
Yep.
And they'll drive away with evidence stuck in their tires, right? They're called Villa casings, But the fact that, I've seen many young cops identify that and secure that fire truck until you guys did your work. And it's just amazing how professional these folks are. But it starts with that first deputy on scene, secure that crime scene.
It sure does.
Lock it down.
Yep.
We could take hours and hours to process it later, but if you don't lock it down, we're not processing anything. So
Chain of custody.
you got it.
Yep.
Starts right there. Thanks. Appreciate you as a human being. Appreciate what you're doing for the sheriff's office, your expertise now as a technician, bringing justice to people that are victims of crime. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, brother.